Ladies and gentlemen, we'll get started shortly. The chairman is now on the way, and we're waiting on a couple of other members. We apologize for the delay. Ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of moving things along, we will go ahead and call the meeting of the Regulated Industries Committee to order and recognize Chairman Bruce Thompson, who will present two bills. The first one is Senate Bill 352. And Mr. Chairman, we'll let you present the bill.
Hello, there we are. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate the opportunity to be able to present two bills, Senate Bill 352, as well as Senate Bill 45. 352 was it's our answer to our workforce problem that we have. We're trying to obviously recruit a couple of verticals into our state. Obviously, we have a challenge right now with firefighters, healthcare providers, and law enforcement in our state. And what this bill does is it seeks to be able to reward those that will relocate to our state by giving expedited consideration to their spouses' licensing. And next to me, I have Mark Hayden. And Mark, if you want to be able to speak as well.
Sure. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Mark Hayden. I'm Director of State Government Affairs at the R Street Institute, which is a free market think tank that supports limited effective government. We spoke in detail in subcommittee about this bill, and just to reiterate what Chairman Thompson said, this is to try to recruit and induce people to relocate to Georgia from out of state, because before the pandemic started, for every 3 job openings that we only had 1 person looking for a job here, and we're suffering mightily from shortages of healthcare providers as well as police officers and firefighters. And by expanding the Military Spouse Licensure Act to extend to those spouses of those kinds of workers, we believe that will encourage people to relocate here and fill these voids.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions. Is that Billy Mitchell, 19?
Yeah.
Chairman Billy Mitchell.
Obviously, the Senate has hit a home run with this bill, and this is unusual. We get this bill of this high quality by the Senate. So at the first opportunity I get, would like to make a motion that we do pass.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you. At the proper time, we'll recognize you. Number 24 is Representative Ridley.
After Representative Mitchell's, what I really like to refer to as bovine fecal matter over there, he just spurted out. I don't know really where I'm going with this, but no. Now, who do you work for?
I work for the R Street Institute. It's a free market think tank.
Is it the think tank group? Y'all had this bill in there last year, I think. Is this one that Heath Clark carried?
That was a different bill. This is far more narrow, and this deals just with those 3 different industries.
Okay. And we're leaving the dentist hygienist out of this. Is that what, did we talk about that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you.
Okay, I see no other questions. I will entertain a motion from Chairman Mitchell.
I move to pass, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a motion and a second for due pass. Is any discussion? Hearing none, if you favor this motion to pass this out of the committee with a due pass recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
If you oppose it, please say no. And it passes. Who will carry it for you in the House?
Chairman Martin.
Chairman Martin, thank you. Next, we have Senate Bill
Moving to
45. Senate Bill 45.
Yeah, on second thought, Mr.
By
Chairman.
Chairman Thompson also.
I may have to withdraw my
Be appropriate to adjourn.
Senate Bill 45.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 45 was a carryover from last year. It's got complete new language in it right now. And basically what we're trying to do is work on some rewrite of these various boards and so on. And next to me, I have Lee Lemke, and he's going to walk us through this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to summarize, this bill was brought to us by the electrical contractors, the plumbing contractors, conditioned air contractors, low voltage contractors, and utility contractors. These 5 groups were requested by the Secretary of State to bring these laws in line with board rules. And that's what this bill simply does. It's 46 pages. It's basically general grammatical changes throughout and a cleanup and simplifying the wording so that it is less restrictive for those who are trying to get their license and also for those out-of-state contractors to comply with our rules and laws. We sent you a list of the technical changes to the bill. Again, there are, just to give you an idea, let me bring this up. Currently there are 5,200 licensed plumbers in the state. There are 8,800 electrical contractors in the state. Conditioned air, there are 121 conditioned air contractors. Low voltage contractors, there's 3,400. And utility contractors, there's 2,941. So a substantial number of industry folks are represented in this bill, and that they're being requested. And the other parties are here as well. But we hope you'll have a favorable consideration on this legislation.
I apologize. I was tied up in Public Safety Committee. Could you go in a little bit more detail? You only got about 40-something pages of this.
Yeah, yes, sir. 43-14 is basically grammatical changes, putting words like they had a comma between, when it says low voltage, they take out the dash between low voltage. And 43-12, we're talking about a 5-foot underground from the definition of utility systems and added access by manhole. Under 43-14-3, this is an electrical change where we don't have what's called a professional engineer. We're changing the qualification of this person to fill electrical and low voltage and from the inspector board position, because there was never an inspector board position, excuse me. The other changes, we're dealing with medical gas piping, where a master plumber class 2 and a journeyman plumber are limited to be able to do this work. Basically, the wording for all 5 trades are that they will have continuing ed for 4 hours. Excuse me, that is exempt, not to include low voltage, just the 4 other trades. We also had a change under 43-14-7, where it was changed to he. Also fulfills requirements to authorize an employee of a licensed business to continue to be engaged in the business should the licensee employer die. And this gives them, this is a very important provision. If a person dies who has a contracting license and unfortunately dies, his business might have to shut down. This provision allows them to have 90 days to find a new person to replace that individual for the license. That's probably one of the most important provisions in this bill. It also requires you under 43-14-10 utility contractors to have a permanent office. There was a change under 43-14-11, just has to have approved safety training. That was another important thing. Another thing, 43-14-13, remove the words limiting advertising to yellow pages in newspapers. We don't do that anymore. So we simply remove that for the things. They raised the fine. That was another important one. 43-14-17, electrical and plumbing provision protecting, where they would increase the fines from $500 to $1,500 These haven't been adjusted, and so that's why that was done. Also, there was another fine adjusted from $1,000 to $3,000 when people are advertising that they have a license, but they really don't, and they do this kind of work. So that's basically what we're going to are addressing
With
with
this
this legislation.
this committee be safe to understand that this is really a cleanup for the construction trades,
Yes, sir.
nothing substantial,
No, sir.
just upgrades, nothing that would give the governor's office reason to veto, because nothing in this would fall under the provisions of the GORP overview.
That is correct. That's my
If I
understanding.
remember right, you told me that this had been looked at by the governor's attorney,
Yes,
and he signed off on this.
yes. And also Senator Tippins went to the governor's office as well. And we believe the latest draft is in agreement with what the governor's office.
Has the governor seen this latest draft?
I believe so, yes.
All right. We're going to hold y'all to that.
Yes,
So
sir.
there's another part that's I wanted to explain myself, and I don't want it vetoed to take that down if it takes something else down.
I totally understand. Yes, sir.
Do we have any questions from the committee on this first section of this? Some people might call that a Christmas tree. Any questions from any of the committee? All right, I'll go over the second part of this bill. If you'll go to section 3 on page 45. This is the exact same language. We have a question, number 24. Who is that?
On line 491 on page 20, where it goes into no person shall engage in low voltage contracting unless such person has valid license. It goes on down here, and then on line 494 right here, it says low voltage contracts should not be required to be licensed under this chapter. What does that mean? We had a low voltage bill here a few years ago and it failed miserably. Is this not the same bill that we had? And is this not what that bill was about that Representative Hawkins carried?
May call on our leg counsel, Jean Marie. You were,
Kind of like the person who's overseeing, like the main person in the company to have a license, but not the people that are working underneath that person. That is the way I read that.
Okay, so what we was trying to do, so the person under them does not have to have a license. Is what you're saying? But the contractor shall have a license, so they just work under his?
I'm just going to read it again to make sure.
Okay,
unless I'm reading this wrong to the gentleman, what I believe I'm seeing is that if you are a low voltage contractor and you have a license, then any of the help that's working for you doesn't have to be licensed.
Yeah.
That would be like a plumber or an electrician. As long as they're licensed, any of their employees that are working under their supervision don't have to be licensed.
That's
all right, so what, on 498 right here, it goes in, it talks about a person that's not licensed as a low voltage contractor shall be prohibited from advertising. So they just can't advertise, and they can still work for the person. They just can't advertise. They can't have a business off of that one person's contract license. Is that right? Branching off.
That's
Okay.
the way I'm reading it.
Okay.
It's sort of like in the cosmetology area, you know, like you can be an apprentice and not be licensed. And you can work and earn money under it, but you don't have to have a license. So
Okay.
that's the way I kind of view
Okay.
that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does it, and thank you for bringing up the conversation that created the question. Does it say anywhere in this bill that the person who works under the licensee has to be supervised by the licensee?
They do have to be supervised, yes.
Does it say that in the bill?
General provisions, if I might, generally the provisions of law on a licensing bill is that the licensee to practice that trade or profession, then that has to be the licensee. The person that works for them in these construction trades, that's a known factor, because if they're not working, if they're out there on their own, then they're basically working without a license.
Might I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
In certain situations that I am most familiar with in the health industry, physicians, nurse practitioners, physical therapists, occupational therapists, they maintain the license. However, if there is an aide or someone working up under them, there's a specification that they are supervised by the licensee. And it carries different requirements, like how many licensee can supervise an XYZ. So I just wanted to know if there's any specific information in the bill that requires and makes the licensee responsible for the person working up under them.
I cannot answer that question. Senator, would y'all like to give that a stab?
I wouldn't mind referring to Sean Marie, but it's like in the pool industry, if you had a contracting license, right? I stepped off the job site. I'm still responsible for the job site, but you still had people working there, right? That didn't mean they had to have a work stoppage, but I ultimately was responsible for it. And my license, or our license, is what's holding accountable for that. If one of them went out and contracted on their own, they were then violating the law because they're extending themselves out without actually being licensed to do that. But I don't believe anywhere in this bill it's going to say you have to stay fully supervised, because it's implied that it's going to fall back under us when you do that. And that's pretty standard in any industry.
It's a little different in certain industries, sir, but I do accept your answer.
Yeah, and I tend to believe that in the healthcare, where we're dealing with people's persons, we have a little bit more concern about that than somebody that's working on your commode.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The gentleman number 16.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is generated by line 1050, page 41. What is the impetus of increasing the fine from 1,000 to 3,000?
I believe, again, this is what the boards had come up with, and I think it's mainly based on CPI index, because they hadn't changed it for many years. So that's where I think they came up with that number.
Okay. May I follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly may.
So is there any impact on that individual based on the infraction? Anything happens to their license? Because it looks like, based on my reading from 1049 through 1051, a misdemeanor, conviction, $3,000 fine, 6 months in jail, but no language about their license. If the infraction has that kind of gravity, will they have to go back to get their license reinstated, or go through some sort of?
I believe that's where the boards come in. They make that determination.
Okay.
Number 27, Mr. Jaspers.
Thank you,
Chairman
Mr.
Jaspers.
Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we all turn over to line 755, that group of utility contractors, you're requiring a board-approved safety training. And normally in the ones that I've seen around this, that usually gives a length of time. Is this an not vagueness? It's an 8-hour class, it's a 4-hour class, it's a 2-day class. There's no, I guess we generally want to make sure that it's not, it does the safety training it needs, but it doesn't overburden a utility contractor to have this.
This particular provision, we worked a lot with Senator Tippins, who is a utility contractor. He believes that we should have safety training, but because we did not want to trigger GORC, that that it was necessary just to say safety training and not put in a time frame in there. I believe that's why it was done like that.
What, do you know currently what the training requirement is?
Yes. John represents the utility contractor.
John Halliburton, from Georgia Utility Contractors Association. I don't know what the current training is, but I know that the original language, according to Senator Tippins, he thought, and other utility contractors thought it was too much continuing education requirements. So we took that all out and just did the safety training at a minimum, what they feel is a minimum amount, and not onerous and too much new continuing education. I can attempt when I sit down and try to figure out what it is currently, but I know the GUCA supports this bill after Senator Tippins voiced a lot of concern with the continuing ed that was in there, that was taken out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have any other questions from any of the committee members? That's this first portion of the bill. Last call. All right, if you'll move to page 45, as I started to speak on this a minute ago, this is the identical bill that this committee and the House voted on earlier in the session, House Bill 430. This allows for the licensure of advanced practical registered nurses in the state, and it adds APRNs and PAs, physician assistants, to the Department of Revenue's DOR list of approved practitioners authorized to order disabled parking permits. Currently, right now, Georgia is one of 11 states that do not currently license APRNs. Quite frankly, there's the nursing board licensed LPNs and RNs. And this is only a way of credentialing or by virtue of the extra education and experience that APRNs would then be licensed to give them proper credentialing and recognition of what their standing is in the nursing community. I have had numerous discussions with our doctor members of the legislature. I've assured them that this is no pathway towards individual private practice of the nurses. And I think this is a good bill, and I think it passed pretty darn near unanimous out of the House. And I would certainly recommend this to the committee members as a way of those some 200 and something thousand nurses. And I think we have like 19,000 are APRNs. So that, committee members, is what this part of the bill does. Now, do we have any other questions on that part of the bill? No? Well, I did a lot better job than I think the other part of it was. So I think that does tell you in this particular case that we have people that think a whole lot more of nurses than they do the construction trade folks. My dear friend that just walked up, would you like to address this part of the bill?
Thank you so much, Chairman Powell. I'm Lisa Eichelberger. I'm Dean Emerita at Clayton State University and the co-director of the Georgia Nursing Leadership Coalition. I did address this group when House Bill 430 came up last year, and I did present this information when we went to GORC. This information did go through GORC, and the disability placards and the separate licensure for the advanced practice nurses did get a unanimous approval through GORC. So it has cleared GORC. And the House Bill 430, which had this exact language in it, did pass the House unanimously. And I think that was a first for us with any type of advanced practice nursing legislation to get no votes. So there is strong support for this legislation. So I do ask that you look favorably on this.
Very
I want to
good.
thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions?
Be happy to answer any questions.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Osborne. It's good to have you here, and thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I'm just going to clarify, there's nothing in here as relates to workforce data. I don't
That's-
see it in here, and I
That's
had the
correct.
opportunity to attend that GORG meeting, and I know there were some concerns about that. I did just want to weigh in though and say that I do understand greatly the desire and the need of to have an understanding about the need for nurses and the workforce data that goes along with that, the types of nurses we need and where we need them throughout the state. And I know that in the past, I've been raised some objections to making that sort of questionnaire mandatory for licensing nurses in Georgia. But I did want to just weigh in and say that I do support perhaps some other approaches to incentivizing nurses to complete those questionnaires in some way. So I hope that you'd be open to some discussions about that perhaps down the road, because I know that's a concern of yours as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we have been working very closely with the Secretary of State and the Board of Nursing since our visit to Gore. That was in there, just to refresh your memory, that part was in House Bill 430 about the collection of workforce data. And we've been working with those two bodies to find ways to enhance the return rate and the collection of that data. Because I certainly understood, and you had some excellent points about the data. And we think we've got some really good ideas about ways to do that.
I look forward to
increase
that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Do we have any other questions from any of the other? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, I don't have a question. At the appropriate time, I'd like to make an amendment.
And where would you like to, this would be well, once we have a motion to pass the bill, then you'll be recognized.
Thank you.
Would you like to make the amendment?
I move to pass the bill.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. This would be the proper time.
On line 1300, page 51, pertaining to the issuance of parking permits for persons with disabilities. I'd like to insert on line 1300, after licensed doctor of podiatric medicine, I'd like to add licensed doctor of physical therapy. Insert that between podiatric medicine and licensed optometrist.
And who is this doctor that you'd like to see in there?
Licensed doctor of physical therapy.
And they can't already do that?
No, sir.
Are you a physical therapist?
I'm a licensed doctor.
And I'm just wondering what has took you so long? All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. All right, would you restate your amendment so that council can get that amendment?
My amendment is on line 1300, following licensed doctor of podiatric medicine. Insert licensed doctor of physical therapy, comma, licensed optometrist, et
We're
cetera.
adding that physical, licensed doctor of physical therapy.
Yes, sir.
All right. I beg your pardon? Well, I mean, if you think you want to talk. All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second? All right. Now, do we have any discussion? I see number 29.
Yes,
sir.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there such a doctorate in physical therapy? I know people are licensed physical therapists, but I'd never heard of a doctor. Doctorate, okay.
Yes, sir. There is a licensed doctor of physical therapy whose educational requirements are competitive and comparable to those listed in this bill.
Good.
And our presenters are evidently affirming that.
Good.
Yes, that is the entry into physical therapy practice.
All right. So your amendment would say at whatever spot, a licensed doctor of physical therapy.
Yes.
All right. Number 27.
Mr. Chairman, it's me. I would too like to make an amendment. Seems to be an admission on line 66. It's just that omission. Yeah. Under there, we're, 66 is covered under state codes, and the natural gas pipeline system should be comma LP gas piping. Is that right? LP, after the word natural gas piping system, comma, we would add comma LP gas piping.
That is going to be a problem though, because there are physical therapists that are not.
All right. Do we have anyone out there? Mr. Lemke, I know this is a stretch. You're getting into gas piping. Do you agree with that? You do? All right.
Great.
Well, we'll handle these separate if you don't mind. All right.
Sure.
Is there going to be any other amendments? Let's go back to the first amendment. On line 1300, we have a proposed amendment. We have a second on that amendment. Do we have any questions on that issue? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. All right. Secondly, Chairman Jaspers, you have an amendment on line 66.
Well, my face won't unlock his phone, Mr. Chairman, but I believe under. Smartphone. It is. On line 66, after natural gas piping system, add the word LP gas piping.
All right. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Do we have any other questions or discussions about this? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We have a member out in the cyberspace. And- All right, now, do we have any other discussion, any other proposed amendments? All right, we have before you LC 5316S as amended, and I would recommend it remain as a committee substitute. Do we have any other discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. And the ayes clearly have that. Now, Senator, who's going to handle your bill?
Can we come talk to you about that?
I'm sure you will. Now, I do want to say under the understanding that if this first section interferes with that second subject matter,
Yes, sir.
then this might wind up being stricken and we might have to be put back into a conference committee. Somewhere in my wildest imaginations, I believe that when this gets over, this is going to probably have more subject matters than this in it. Every now and then, it gets bills get decorated in those last days. Thank you so much, Senator, and thank you for letting me use your bill for my tag along. And I'm sure the nurses will be very grateful to you for that.
It is my pleasure, Mr. Chairman.
You're more than welcome. Good to see you. All right. Next up, we have Senate Bill 445. And Representative Washburn, Vice Chairman Washburn is going to handle that bill. And I'll certainly give you the option if you rather go to the front or would you rather do it from your seat?
It's your preference.
Just whatever suits you, and I think you'll be just fine there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am on behalf of Senator Burns of the 23rd presenting Senate Bill 445 LC 441888. This is a very simple bill. It deals with increasing fines relative to inspections of manufactured housing to the federal penalties, which standardizes that. There's two items that are changed. The State Fire Marshal's Office has a cooperative agreement with the Department of Housing and Urban Development under which they inspect manufactured housing. And they have the authority to issue civil penalties for violations found. And in their most recent state plan review from HUD, the recommendation was that they update the Georgia code to raise the penalties to the federal standards. And that is what this bill does. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
All right. Very good. All right, any questions from any of the committee members? Any questions? All right, if not, what's the will of this committee? We have a motion. Do we have a second? Any discussion? Any amendments? If not, all in favor say aye. Yeah, opposed? And the ayes clearly have it. Ladies and gentlemen, that conducts the business in front of this committee today, and we will stand adjourned until we meet again.